Snakes are among the least studied groups of vertebrates on the planet, and especially little is known about the parasite communities that these snakes interact with and how those interactions might impact their susceptibility to fungal infection. Today, we're headed into the field with Dr. Kinsey Pereira and PhD candidate Alex Nelson, who are investigating the relationship between parasites and fungal infection in the snakes of North Carolina. But first, we need to catch a snake.
Got him. It's okay. It's okay. All right. Check it out. That's a beautiful northern water.
Once a snake has been captured, the data collection process begins with basic biometric information like length, weight, and sex. Then we conduct a thorough visual inspection for any signs of potential fungal infection. We call these signs scale abnormalities and can include visual indicators like discoloration, crustiness, or lesions on the scales. An ultraviolet light is also used to check for any areas of fluorescence, which can be an additional indicator of potential fungal infection. However, the only way to know for sure if a snake has clinical Ophidiomyces ophidicula, otherwise known as snake fungal disease, is a lab test for the fungus's DNA. So to make sure that we collect that fungal DNA when it's present, we swab the entire surface area of the snake and collect additional swabs of any scale abnormalities.
And that will tell us if the snake has either come into contact with the disease or if it's infected with it. I mean, the exciting moment when you find a snake, everyone's screaming and they're like, oh my gosh, we got one. I can tell you my least favorite part is running into spider webs in between the trees.
During this process, Alex is also checking these snakes for ectoparasites, things like ticks, mites, or leeches, which might be attached to the outside of the snakes. And when a snake is large enough, we'll collect a small blood sample and a stool sample to test for blood parasites and digestive parasites, respectively. Back in the lab, Alex and the team are hard at work dissecting already deceased snakes that have been collected by herpetology professionals throughout the state.
It's super juicy. So to cut open the snake, I'm going to start by making a cut across the neck region here, so I have somewhere to insert my scissors. And then once I have a place to put my scissors, I'm just going to insert them like this and cut all the way down that side, kind of like cutting wrapping paper. And if you want to get a good look, I accidentally cut the stomach, and you can even see those nematodes sticking out right there.
Wait, so those are parasites right there?
Yeah, so those are nematodes. I think there's at least 1, 2, maybe 3 of them right here.
Vile.
So these are classic Neurodia parasites. They're all in the stomach. They're called Ophidactylus asci, and they actually make holes through the stomach lumen and kind of like penetrate through the stomach wall, and that's where they live. I imagine that's really uncomfortable. So when we find a parasite, I put them in this little dish right here, so then I can take a good picture of them, look at them on the compound microscope, and then we go ahead and voucher them in ethanol so that I can do genetics work on those later. So if we want to go through the organs really quick, we can usually tell what they are based on the location in the body and then the texture. So the esophagus and the trachea are running together from the mouth all the way down towards the lung. The lung looks kind of honeycombed because it's those branchial ridges that you see. So the stomach is going to be really wide, usually full of diet items or parasites. Stomach continues on to the intestines, which do kind of wind back and forth all throughout the rest of the snake body, all the way down to the cloaca. So next we get to take out all of these organs, and I'm going to put them on these squash plates. And we literally squish the organs between these plates so that we can look through them and see the parasites that are inside. So I usually start by looking at one corner, and then I'm going to move my squash plate around so that I can see through all of the organ that I have on there. So I found one nematode. It looks like the ones that were in the stomach maybe got up a little higher into the esophagus. And then I found a couple trematode or flatworm adults. So I'm going to put those in this dish, and then I'm going to put them on the slide so we can get a better look at the compound microscope. And that lets us take a really nice close-up look of them. I'm actually a trematode taxonomist, so these are my favorite, and we can tell what they are based off of their internal organs. Based on the placement of the organs and the body shape, I actually can just put this into genus right now. This is the genus Pneumatophilus. So it got to this snake through something called trophic transmission. It probably was a larval stage in a fish. The snake ate that fish, and now it developed into an adult in the snake and make all of these eggs you can see here. So these eggs will actually pass out of this trematode through the snake's digestive system and be pooped out. and then they will hatch and be ready to infect the first intermediate host, which is usually a freshwater snail. So this is a pentastome or lungworm, and you might have heard that we have an invasive pentastome coming into our native snakes through pythons in Florida, but this one is actually a native species. It's in the genus Porocephalus, and you can see there's its mouth right there, and then pentastomes are really fun. They have these 4 hooks that they use to grab onto those snake lungs. So I know that this one is a female because I can see all these eggs right here. And then here you can clearly see those segmented bits. And so that's how we know it's an arthropod. So we've noticed a few trends in the parasite diversity between the different snake species that we study. So things that eat a lot of diverse meals very often, like a Neurodia eating fish and frogs and toads, are more likely to have more parasite diversity and abundance than snakes that eat a few meals far in between, like a rattlesnake eating a rabbit once every couple months. We could dissect maybe 20 rattlesnakes and maybe 3 of them will be infected. There are many reasons to care about parasite diversity in snakes. One of the main reasons is that we just don't know a lot about snake parasites. So we can't really do any type of predictive modeling unless we have this baseline data to know what we're working with in the first place. If we have this background data, we will be able to detect when we are seeing host jumps, especially from invasive species to our native species. And then finally, with global change, we might expect some snake species to become more rare, maybe even go extinct, unfortunately. And so with this, we can see what parasites are specific to those snakes, and we may be able to predict co-extinction events as that occurs. It's estimated that about half of all animals on Earth are parasites, and that is what I think of parasites as. Like, they're not just some bacterial disease, they're living animals. So when we lose host biodiversity, we're also losing parasite biodiversity, and that's not something that's really considered in most ecological studies. So from a disease ecologist perspective, one way that you can help promote snake conservation is by sanitizing not only your hands, but your snake catching gear in between catches, so that you're not spreading diseases from one snake to the other. And that's a huge concern for things like snake fungal disease, which are easily passed on by humans to snakes.
As the team continues collecting and analyzing fungal and parasitological data, they will continue to illuminate the dynamic interactions that are constantly occurring between snakes and the rest of the ecosystem. Here's your sneak peek at the species that will be featured in the next episode of The Wild Report. I'll see you next time, but until then, stay curious and keep adventuring everywhere. This is Ben Zeno of The Wild Report, signing out.